Hey guys, I found this cool hook on the internet that I really like to share with you guys. So those who follow me on this channel know that usually what would happen is I create a video where I'll show you guys the end product as my introduction, what we'll be doing, and then we'll work towards that end product during the video. But this one is going to be a bit different. This one is where I'm going to just take a quick overview or a quick introduction to this hook that I have found that we can install with our React application that will handle all the state management for us and also all the validation while using less code. Sounds interesting? I do advise you guys to stick along as we code this quick one today. So what I'm going to do right off the bat, as you guys can see on this page, it explains exactly what it's about and how it's going to work, and let's test this out. So what I've done already, as you guys would know, I've went and created my React application using npx create react app. I called it cool forms because this is what this page is called. I called it cool forms, and once that has run, what you guys need to do is the following. Need to go ahead onto this page, go to react-cool-form.netlify.app. The link is in the description that you can link towards, and you guys can go ahead and view it. In the getting started document, we want to scroll down to the installation part, and if you're using yarn, you can go ahead and just run yarn.add react-cool-form. If you're using node package manager, you can use npm install --save react-cool-form and let that run. And while you are waiting, I do encourage you guys to click on that red button which says subscribe. Click on the bell notification button so you get notified every time I publish a new video, and I do ask you guys to like the videos and comment if there's anything during this video that you guys would like to see, you'd like me to go more in depth, or just have a question. Hit me up in a comment. I'll do my best to reply to you. So what I'm going to do, let me just open up my application over here and let's get coding. I think that's enough talking. Let's get coding. So I'm using Visual Studio Code. I'm going to head and hit Control, and with the button just on top of Tab to open up my terminal, I'm going to say yarn start to start up my development server so that we can see the application as we work. So I'm just going to wait for that to start up, and as you guys can see, it's on localhost 3000, and we should have the default. There we go. So that's our default starter boilerplate, and let's get started with using this form. So basically what it states that we can call this form just by using a hook. So we can say useForm, because if you're creating a custom hook, it is recommended by React that you call it use whatever the hook it's going to be called. That's the same as you say use state, use context, use effect. So it is recommended to be called use, just as you guys can see right here at the bottom. So let's go ahead and code this form up. So the one that I'm going to be coding more or less, if I go back to the home page, is this one right here at the bottom. So they do kind of give you an example to play around, but let's quickly code this and see if it's really going to handle firstly my state management, secondly my validation, and thirdly, am I going to use less code as I would creating a form and doing the functions to handle submit, handle the change in a React form. Let's go ahead and do that. Enough babbling. So I'm going to get rid of all that. What I'm going to do is get rid of all this. I'm not going to use it, so I'm getting rid of all that. Let's import. I'm just going to go back to my React application so that we don't stay on that screen. So I'm going to ahead and say import. It's called useForm. So I'm importing the useForm from React cool form. That's what I'm importing. And the next thing that I want to do is just create my form right there in the return. So I'm going to head and say form, and then my form is going to have an input, and this input is going to have an ID. This ID is going to be called username, and also name property, which is also going to be called username. I'm also going to add a that's it. Let's just have that one input for now. Let's have a button, the submit button, which is just going to be my input for now. Type is going to be submit because I want the button submit. and let's close this off. Okay, I have that over there. If I save it, let's just see how it looks. Should look really ugly. There we go. So we just have an input, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a component for my inputs, and I'm gonna pass through all the params that I wanted, or the props that I want that input to have. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Firstly, I'm gonna go ahead and say const, I'm gonna call this form field, okay, is equal to this, an arrow function, and this arrow function just returns the following. It's going to return a div. Okay, so I'm going to wrap everything up in a div. Let me just give this a class name. So the class name is going to be called input-container, and inside here I'm going to have a label. Just want to have a label also, so I'm going to say label. So my label is going to say enter your username. Below my label, I'm going to have an input. Let me just copy this input over here. This is going to be my input, and I'm going to add a placeholder to it. My spelling is right. Placeholder. It's going to say username example John D. That's an example of your username, and that's it. So now let's go ahead and replace this with this component that we just created on top called form fields. Gonna save it, and let's quickly see if I go ahead and refresh this. So we do have our label there saying enter username. We have our input field. So that's not where the magic is as of yet. So the magic will start right now. Let's go ahead and create a const and just destruct the following out of this form, and also get state from the useForm, from this useForm hook. Okay, so basically, as you guys can see, that my IDE tells us that we have a config option that we can use, which is actually an object that takes in default value, validate on change, validate on blur, etc. But the one we're going to use for this tutorial, this intro tutorial, just the two, it's going to be default values to set up our default values, and it's going to be on submit to take care when you click the submit button. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just destruct out of that and say default values. So my default value, it's going to be an object, and that's going to have my username, and my username, it's going to be an empty string. Okay, and it's going to pass through also, that's my username, my email address. So my email address is going to be an empty string, and my password, empty string. So what I'm going to do now is just hit Control B to close the sidebar. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a bit smaller. There we go. So have our default value firstly. So I'm using this hook right now from React Cool Forms, and then the next one that I'm going to do is on submit. So on submit, so when the form gets submitted and you do the following, it's actually a function, it's called values. Okay, an arrow function. I'm just going to alert this out for you, and the way I'm going to do that is just say alert. And because it's an object, I'm going to JSON stringify it. Okay, so I'm going to convert it into a string, and I'm going to say values. Okay, so I'm just passing that through over there by converting it to a string. So now I need to hook this form up with this useState, and how I'm going to do that, I just go ahead and say ref, okay, which is referencing it, and I'm going to say it's equal to this form over here, and I'm going to go ahead and add now validate. Okay, so now I have this form field over here, which currently has this default over here. So if I go ahead and do the following and say required, I'm going to save this. I've saved it. I can quickly refresh. If I hit submit, nothing is showing. The reason why nothing is showing is that this get state give me actually access to the errors that have been passed through because of that required. So I can use this get state to get those errors. So I can go ahead right here and say const errors. So should any errors arise, get state, what I want from you is the error. So there are different options that you can actually pass through over here to say what it is that I wanted to pull back. But at the moment, what I want is the errors. And the second one, as you guys can see, as my IDE shows, it's options, which is an object that you can actually go ahead and set. The first one is the target, and the second one is this errors with touch, which is just a Boolean value. I'm gonna go ahead and change that one. So I'm gonna say errors with touch, and I'm going to change it to true. Okay, so let me just add my spacing over there. So now all errors are actually locked into this guy. So if we go ahead and do the following and say console.log errors, okay, let's just spell that correctly, which is errors. Let me save it, and let's quickly check this out. I'm gonna hit F12 on my keyboard to pull up that, and as you guys can see, it's already pulling out that that error. So I can refresh this. It's an empty object at first. If I hit submit, it's gonna show me object on username. It has an error saying please fill out this field. So it's pulling that one on username right there because it's recognizing that this value over here, this name property, has actually username. So it's hooking that up automatically. So that's already the state of it. So it's already using the use state and hooking it up to the input field in order to capture that errors. So let's go ahead and duplicate this form field 3 times because we have 3 values over there. And let's pass through some params or props. Let's pass through some props. So what I want firstly is I want an ID. So I can go ahead and say ID is equal to, so my first one's ID is going to be username, the same as I have it right here on top. It's username, and I'm going to pass through a label because I actually want to have a label in there as well. So my label is going to be enter your username. That's my label. I'm going to pass through that it is required. There we go. Am I spelling it correctly? Why do I feel I'm not spelling? Okay, it's required. And I'm going to pass through my placeholder, which is also just going to be example John capital D. I'm gonna do the same for my second field. It's gonna be ID. So my second field is called email, so that's what it's gonna be. And I'm gonna hook it up and say label. So my label is gonna be enter your email address, and I'm gonna have a placeholder also, just in case you need an example to remember your email address. It's gonna be john@doe.com. This is also gonna be required. And my last field is going to be ID. I'm just going to give it a password. I'm going to give it a label. Enter your secure password. Alright. So there we go. So what I can pass through in this field as well is the type. So I can go ahead and pass through the type and say type. It's email. So it's not going to be string. And I'm going to do the same right here. I'm not gonna add a placeholder because it's a password field, but what I'm gonna do is the following: just pass through the type as well and say that the type is password. Okay, because I don't want you to see what you're typing. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make this one also required. Okay, now let's save this. Once save this, we shouldn't see changes to this because we haven't updated our component as of yet. Let me just close this. As you guys already have seen the errors that it gives. So it really does the validation there with the state of it. Let's quickly check now how we're going to go ahead and update this component. So as I've said, I've added now props to it. So I need to pass that props through as params. So I can go ahead and say, let's say props dot, so the first one is ID comma. I can do it this way, but that's the old way to do it, we can put it that way. So what we can use is called destructuring. So we can go ahead and add this curly braces and just call ID, and I'm gonna go ahead and call label because the other one I'm using, and then the other one I want is actually to display the errors when the errors arise. So what I can do is the following. Let me just go ahead, I'm just gonna add it right here in front because I want to type there at the end because that's way, or let me do it here at the end. Let's go ahead and add our error over here. So I'm adding an error prop, and that error is going to be errors dot, as you guys remember, if I just pull this back up, for this error it's actually an object which is errors dot username. So it picks it up as username because we have this username over here. So I can go ahead and say errors dot username. Okay, so I'm passing through the username error there through this prop. I'm going to do the same thing with my email. Error, it's equal to errors dot email, and I'm going to do the same thing with my password. I'm going to say error is equal to, not quotation but curly braces, errors dot password. Okay, so those are my errors, and I can go ahead and call those errors there. And lastly, now what I'm going to do is just say all the rest. So all the rest of it, that it's not an ID, if it's not an ID, not a label, not an error, all the rest will be combined into this variable that I've done over there. So I'm spreading everything else into this object. Okay, so let's go ahead and start updating this. So my label, I can go ahead and say HTML for the ID, okay, because I want to link that up, and right here I can pass through label. Okay, so whatever label didn't pass through, that's what I wanted to display there. My ID, it's going to be the ID, and then the name, it's also going to be the ID, it's going to be the same as the ID. My placeholder text, it's going to be placeholder actually. So all of this, I can get rid of all these, and what I'm going to do is the following. I'm just going to do dot 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 rest. Okay, so basically what this is going to be is it's just going to echo out whatever hasn't been used into this input field. So this rest will actually contain my placeholder, it's going to contain my type and my required. Awesome, right? Right. Then let's go ahead and handle our error. So I'm going to use this curly braces to say if, it's like an if statement, if error equal is true, then do the following. Use this paragraph tag, but I'm just going to use the small tag for my text to display. So the text is going to display there is error. Okay, so if there's an error, if this validates to be true, like there's an error, display this. Okay, that's basically it. So now I'm going to save this and let's have a look. Let's refresh. Now I have nothing. If I click on submit, they displays my error handling. So basically now I have my on submit, I have my on change that's handle my errors, and I'm just validating state. So my validations are working and my state hookup, let's quickly have a look. So my username is called Crazy Hooks, okay, because I play some crazy games. And my email is john@dow.com. My password is React Forms. So I'm just going to submit this. On submit, as you guys can see, there is my JSON. Let's just prettify this. So let's just make it more readable by passing through a second option, calling it undefined, and passing through a number to say 2. With that, let's say okay. Refresh. Let's go ahead and do Crazy Hooks again. Email address is going to be john@dow.com. My password is going to be Crazy Hooks Rock, and let's say submit. Now as you guys can see, my form have submitted this username. It's called Crazy Hooks, email John Doe, password Crazy Hooks Rock. So basically guys, I just wanted to do a quick intro video to this hook plugin that you guys can use with your React forms. If you guys would like me to dive deeper into the API of this hook, explain exactly how we can use it with complex form, as I've said earlier, hit me up in the comments. I love hearing from you guys, and I'll do my best to reply to each and every one of your comments. Until next time, guys, this is me saying stay safe.